and how you see like that sense of, I would say like, because there is a formulation of what is then community, no? Like how community is described, no? And how it can be sustained through this media. I mean, I have said in other occasions how intense I feel the lack of going to the neighborhood, no? I'm in Southeast London, you are thinking east or northeast, Raúl is also east, Blanca, you're southeast. I mean, there is something about, as you said, no? The everyday experience of a space and how much the relationship that you establish through that, not only with the people that live there, but also the environment, creates an understanding of the place for you. Like how one can engage with that in the distance, would you say? What would be the formula? How you understand that process at the institutional level, if any, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the question that's been so urgent this year now, or at least over the months since March when we first went into lockdown, to question like what are the possibilities for connecting from a distance in this sense, and how will that continue over the months, over the period ahead, and how can we to kind of devise or think through means of connecting with people whilst being remote. And that's an ongoing question and a process, and in a way it affords the space to, you know, we can connect online in this way with one another, which has been our sort of, as a team, intimately our own methods of organizing and connecting has necessarily been remote. And then so thinking about how we then extend that to a process of generating conversations or a kind of workshop context that will necessarily have to be online for now. And if that's the case, then who will be able to participate and who would not? Or are there other means? For example, we've been thinking about posts and like printed ways of connecting, which is, you know, just like simple tools of enabling people to participate in a way, or, you know, phone conversations or networks of relations of maybe if there's someone who's organizing in the neighborhood who does have connections and can speak to someone who's local that we couldn't. But you have to think about these kind of expanded networks in new ways. And about that infrastructure that is lacking.
And then perhaps at this point, it will be good to ask Raúl, and then also, of course, everybody else can pitch up, to tell us a little bit more about what Recetas Urbanas project, Affection as a Subversive Architecture, Unauthorized Entry Permitted, is about.
So the origin of the project starts in autumn 2019, actually, when Recetas Urbanas began working with a group of parents that were hoping to create a shared communal space as part of a forest school in Biggin Woods, which is an area of oak woodland in Croydon, in South London. And then expanding on this research, the showroom was planned to become a communal learning environment, let's say, a sort of a multi-purpose space combining the functions of a living archive, showing previous projects from the theaters, but also social forum, as well as a working studio that involved a series of workshops convened by RTR Blanca Pujals. So in that sense, the project was aiming to involve and to explore the possibilities of creating alternative architectural and educational spaces through participatory construction methods and activating citizenship. The whole problem was that due to the first lockdown in March, the showroom had to be closed after 1 month of the project being open. And it reopened at the end of 2020 with the second iteration of Affection as a Reserve Architecture, the one that is at the space now, that was adapted in relation to the conditions arising due to the pandemic and convened also in collaboration with Blanca. So in this iteration, the project aims to open up collective thinking around modes of spatial organization and hopefully encourage the formation of new social relations within and beyond public and cultural institutions. So in that sense, there are two parts of this project. There is an archival display at the showroom with videos and a lot of data sheets from information from the whole trajectory of the studio. And at the same time, there will be a series of workshops that we will do with different members of our community around the showroom. And that will go on from probably now December till March 2021.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a shame, no? Because I remember in February that we were planning to gather with 100 of different other collectives interested in the same issues in London that we were already connecting. But yeah, the thing that we cannot gather together to have this conversation was a problem at that moment, and hopefully in the future we can restart again all these conversations. But because I think to have also this network in London will be really interesting as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about your research on those groups, Blanca? Who were they, what kind of interests they have, and how they connect to Rosetta's practice and your interest?
Well, I connected many different groups in London that I think they were maybe a little bit disconnected, and that was a moment to gather all together. That was, for me, was super interesting, also for Resetas Urbanas, Santi Cirujeda and Alisa Tut. And it's people that is working in processes of self-building processes in London, working with children, with other kinds of communities, self-building their own spaces, also their own houses, for example, and also trying to work into legal terms, how we can also maybe modify some laws in the of building the city to allow this kind of projects to be real and to keep going on. I think, yeah, it was, the people was from different communities. I mean, different, people, maybe, different kind of communities, children, but maybe also homeless, also other kind of communities that were involved in these projects. And this was super interesting, but we have this network now. So hopefully in the future, because it makes sense to do it if we can gather like in a place to work together, because maybe also now, us that are architects, we really like to be all together, just drawing, thinking together, and create producing collective knowledge, but together. It's difficult sometimes to do it in this kind of medium.
Do you cherish this more now that we are constrained to?
Yeah, of course, a lot, because also the people, I think, feels more free to share experiences like in another ways, not only talking in front of a screen, but also having the tools, well, for Resetas Urbanas that they work through construction, through self-building, it's very difficult because you cannot use the tools, because you have these conversations while constructing sometimes, and you are creating these links or these relationships through the processes of construction. So yeah, it's quite difficult. Also, I remember that we were planning these talks, Also, I wanted to invite, for example, Adela Cortina that talks about aparophobia. That is this problem that we have now, that the people is not, that we remove people from these decisions because, not only because of terms of race, or we hate not only in terms of race or gender, but also because they are poor. And then this not fits in this idea of a city like London, for example, or all the cities in the world.
Yes, Lily, please.
No, it's just like feeding off what you were saying, Blanca, in relation to Rosetas, in which the sort of the process of construction and what happens between people in the act of doing and working together being so central. Yeah. And yet they come with there's a sort of framework of thinking around their practice, and that is constantly being revised and updated in relation to what takes place between people in the act of doing, of building, and of working together.
This is why, well, as you said, that the second name for the exhibition was unauthorized entry permitted, because we were trying all together to build this space at the showroom, like if we consider the social part of the cultural. So you remember that we tried to, during the lockdown, to find a space, or also maybe to modify the law in a way to allow people to gather there, not only for a cultural project or for Rosetta's project, but also to gather people that is alone or isolated at home, for example, to give them the space at the showroom, maybe also to use it for the pandemic.
And what are the actual impediments for an institutions to become a public space in the way that you are both mentioning? What would you say that it is? The key issues behind not being able to fulfill that
Do you mean in this moment during the pandemic? Yeah, I mean, when we first began to think through whether and how it might be possible to enable people to, say, meet and gather safely at the building, we were also the constraints begin where you think about what it takes to host people safely within a space, such as the showroom, members of the public to gather together in a way that they can be, that space can be held, and it's all of the kind of behind the scenes work that takes place to kind of enable that to happen, the moment of publicness or even for the building to be open. Even as a small team of six members of staff, and then a kind of wider team of gallery assistants who work on a more ad hoc basis in relation to when we have projects open. It's sort of have it being able to organize around a group of people in the midst of the pandemic in order to create a space to welcome people in safely was I think the core of the question, because, for example, everything from the point of literally opening the door and enabling people to come into the building requires a set of kind of really carefully thought through and kind of cared for operations, if you will, which is held between us as a group of people. So, would Raúl cross London one day to go to open up the building? It starts to become very technical, but this is about the process, right?
Yeah.
So it's that day would Raúl feel safe to come across London to open up the building, to be there with the keys and to let somebody in who would be liaising with people to let them know that was a possibility in the neighbourhood, which goes back to that question of how we connect with and communicate at this time. Who would have access or know that they had the means to access, and then within what time frames throughout the day. So it's about, it's the intricacies and the really significant nature of sort of communicating with people and organizing to enabling something to happen. So I guess that sort of initial, the vision of having, there's a building there, so why can it be made public or open to people who are living or working nearby? You immediately get into these questions of logistics, and it is a kind of care structure around enabling that to happen.